When I start a painting, one of the last things I'm thinking about is all the mistakes that I'm going to make along the way. But they do end up happening, and they happen a lot more often than you'd probably think. I think the problem is that as artists, we're rarely ever exposed to this part of the creative process. Whenever I go to a museum and look at great paintings, or even just scrolling through my Instagram feed, I'm mostly seeing finished pieces of great art. I don't ever see like bad paintings or mistakes made during their process. So for me, this kind of tricks my mind into thinking that the process just must have gone smoothly for them. I think these artists didn't make any mistakes or don't make mistakes, so I just must not be as good as they are. And it's this type of thinking that has led me to self-doubt and negative thoughts during my own creative process when things aren't going as well as I had planned. So before I get into the mistakes that I made, let me give you a little background on this painting that I did. I first heard Aurora's music back in 2016 when she released her first album, and I instantly felt an emotional connection with the messages in her songs. Most of her songs are about nature or human relationships, things we can all relate to. She's someone who isn't afraid to be herself or go against the grain, and she's had a real impact on my work and just how I see the world in general. So it just felt right to me to have her in my sketchbook, and that's why I created this painting. So let's get into the mistakes. To start off, I made my first mistake as soon as I laid down the first stroke. Lack of preparation. I didn't realize until I was already a few minutes into the painting that I had forgot to tone the canvas. Normally I'd start out with like a thin layer of some sort of useful color, and in this case it probably would have been some sort of a brown skin tone. This isn't really a necessary step for creating a painting, but I definitely feel for me that it helps me later on for judging the values correctly and just the rest of the stages of the painting. But at this point, there really wasn't much I could do since I already started the painting, so I just continued on. I had also made the mistake of going straight for the colors I was seeing rather than preparing like a monochrome layer of black and white or gray and white to work out the values. So this meant I had to tackle the values, the color, and the saturation all at the same time, which was really difficult for a portrait like this. It was really a conscious decision, and it was an experiment to see if I could really do it, if I could pull it off. But in the end, it was a lot more challenging than I thought it was going to be. As the painting progressed, I found myself struggling to find the right color notes, and I think this was due to two main reasons. The first one is lack of preparation, as I stated earlier, and also the fact that the subject is completely in shadow, and this was my second mistake, having a challenging reference photo. I found my reference photo to be much more challenging than I had originally anticipated. I usually would welcome a challenge like this because no doubt it's going to help my skills in the long run and just overall improve my painting. But since I didn't prepare properly in the beginning and I had that lack of preparation, the difficulty was just amplified. The reason this reference photo was so challenging is because of the lack of contrast. The only real high contrast is on the hair and a little bit on the chest. The rest is all completely in shadow and reflected light. And I found it very challenging to keep the value structure close together, and I found it very easy to overdo the reflected lights on her face. And I think that's what made this very challenging, is keeping that close value structure and very subtle changes in value and color. And since my subject was quite difficult, I found myself unable to put down confident strokes of color, and I ended up making my next mistake, which is overblending. So I blended way too much during this entire painting session. So rather than using a transition tone between two areas of color, I would just put down the color and blend them together. And this really killed the brushwork and it killed the colors. Overall, it was just not a good thing to do. I did want a smoother look to her face. I didn't want a lot of blocky brushstrokes, but I felt I could have achieved this smoothness without overblending the way that I did. And it also just gave me trouble in the long run and more things to fix as the painting went on. I find myself overblending like this when I'm not feeling confident with the strokes of color that I'm putting down. I'm putting them down very lightly and not confidently. And I think one of the problems is why I had this lack of confidence during this painting session was because of the lack of preparation at the beginning. I think if I had prepared a little bit more in the beginning, as I said earlier, I would have been able to put down more confident color notes and strokes, and I wouldn't have this overblending problem. My last mistake was having a lack of discipline. And what I mean by that is that I jumped around the canvas and the painting almost the entire painting session. You know, normally in the beginning stages, the blocking in stage, it's not really a big deal to jump around as much, but as the painting progresses and I get more closer to a finish, it's a good idea to kind of finish the eyes as much as possible and finish the nose before moving on and just jumping around. And I found it very challenging to do that during this painting session. And while I was painting this, I actually realized that I was jumping around too much and I had this lack of discipline. And even after that realization, I still found it really challenging. And again, I think the main problem goes back to having that lack of preparation, lack of the values in those beginning stages. I feel it's important to recognize the mistakes that I made during this painting process so that I can learn from them. And on my next painting, I'll hopefully be able to bring it to a finish more efficiently. And I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to focus only on negativity or be too hard on myself. You know, instead, I'm trying to think in terms of improvement and progress of my work moving forward. So every painting that I do is really just an experiment in trying to be more efficient and creating something that I'm happy with in terms of the color, the brushstrokes, and the realism. It's really important to realize that we all make mistakes and we're probably going to continue to do so for the rest of our lives, and that's okay. It's not a big deal. I think we'll just end up learning more than we thought, and that's really a good way to look at it, I think. And just because you make mistakes during the process, it doesn't mean that it's going to end up being a bad painting. So now with my next portrait painting, or really any painting that I do, I have some valuable points of information to bring forward with me. You know, preparation is key. Making sure that I tone the canvas, make sure I have a monochrome layer to start out with to really help me guide the values for the painting. Choosing a reasonable subject, something that's not so difficult, and being a little more cautious about the reference photos that I choose. Being sure to try to place a stroke, be confident about the colors that I put down, and don't overblend. Just be real confident about that. And also, as the painting gets towards the final stage, having more discipline with finishing an area before moving on to the next and not jumping around too much. I feel that if I can do those things, I think my process will go a lot more smoothly, at least more smoothly than it did with this painting. And that's really what I'm looking for, you know, some kind of improvement with my process or my method and just my work overall. So what are some mistakes that you guys have made during your painting process, or what is something you find challenging during the process? Post it down below in the comments. I would love to hear from you guys. I really appreciate you watching this. Be sure to check out my other videos if you'd like to support me that way. Let me know how this video has helped you out. I would love to hear from you. Keep on painting and drawing. Don't get discouraged. Take care of yourself. Peace, my friends.